Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of big finished audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Today, on the 15th of January 2020, we're starting to look at a Fifth Doctor audio that is often, sort of touted as one of the best. You know, it's this is Mark Platt's Spare Parts. Now, before we begin, I just wanted to do a quick little little notice that because we are in 2020 and past the first of the year, and the rulings have changed, that this video is not made for kids. Doctor is a family show, and this story in particular is definitely adult. And one with all of the, and one where you have, where you have, you have the story, geared at adults. So if you are a child, you should not watch this. But yes, we are starting with Spare Parts Part 1. Now, Part 1 of Spare Parts is incredibly important. It's incredibly important in establishing the tone of this story, the characters, and just some of the ideas. Now, the story opens with this newsreader in something that doesn't really fit in with like the main plot or anything really that the story does. It's a newsreader. What would they do with the plot? But what it does is it does give a lot of information on basically at what point, basically how Mondas as a planet is in this story, as well as how essentially how much of sort of how desperate they are. Like, there's this whole idea of a man with the most modern of science that modern science can provide is taking his place amongst the stars, by essentially showing that we can, and we can overcome, which of course is an interesting, it does give us an interesting sort of one of those interesting sort of points of clarification that the story can, in fact, do something like this, and it just sort of creates the atmosphere, because then we spend the rest of the episode mostly with the Doctor and Nyssa, and in being with the Doctor and Nyssa, you get the real, just this real sense that that everything is, that everything there is, one of those things where you have a sense that things don't really aren't really doing, having the full effect, and the full sort of the full story isn't being isn't being explored, because this is a dark story. It's a Um, it's a story. Um, it's a story where you have the just you have the atmosphere being so drilled in as terrifying and bleak. This is a bleak episode. Like Nyssa, basically realizing it's Mondas, immediately wants to try to change things. Oh, we could stop the Cybermen at their development, and stop destroying them. Um, but the Doctor has to convince her, essentially, that no, you can't do that. Um, you can't really do that. Um, it's one of those things where um, you have the uh, um, you have um, you have the story going on, and uh, and you have the story really, really bleak because he gets paired up with the Hartley family, who, is a poor family. Um, you have just they're taking their rations, but the father in of the family essentially is like um, you know is like willing to take her in, but her two, and you have the daughter Yvonne, who immediately becomes friends with him, but then you also have the son Frank, who is probably the more interesting character, because he sort of shows the wanting to trust the government and have the hope, because just sort of being in this whole idea of not having control of their life, that's really, really interesting. Like, and basically, like, a Cyberman comes in to take her away as sort of a policeman, so we already have like the idea of the Cybermen being there. And while the Doctor is on the other side looking at like dealing with a thief played by Darren Nesbitt, who, if I remember rightly, he was the villain way back in Marco Polo. He's sort of the he's sort of just this thief character, who really, really has, it's one of those things where you have, you have the character as it stands, was just very, this very, very nice, kind person just trying to make a living, and you really sort of get this sort of fascist regime feeling, like everything being sterile, everything being there, and that's something that plot does a great job for. Like, it just hits you, and that's how good the episode is. That it hits you right as soon as it's over. That's how harsh it is. So overall, I'm going to give part 1 of Spare Parts a 10 out of 10. Alright, it's the 16th of January 2020, and I just finished listening to part 2 of Spare Parts. And there's a lot to talk about here, because, oh, the body horror. Yeah, Spare Parts is one of those stories that is known for being incredibly dark and depressing, and I absolutely love it for it, because it's not afraid to go there. And what I mean by that is that the setting of this story is a dying world. Like, everyone is dying. This isn't like, oh, everything's fine, everything's gonna be fine, and the war, and everything's gonna eventually sort itself out. No, this is a story where everyone's going to die. Eh, like, and you know the planet itself is on its last, it's on its last legs. And being faced with extinction, really all the Mondasians can do is become Cybermen. Now, part two introduces the character. Really gets to shine for two important characters. First, Doctorman Allan, who is played by Sally Knivet, or Knivet. I don't know how you say her last name, but she was in Blake. I know she was another character in Blake 7, and she played. Yeah, so she played. I know she played a character in Blake 7. I'm not very familiar with Blake 7, but Doctorman Allan is just this woman who is just emotionally drained. Like, she's an alcoholic. She's clearly a genius. Like, she's the one who designed the Cybermen. And is basically the Davros for the Cybermen, except isn't a megalomaniacal evil person who wants conquest. She was just trying to put something together, and she clearly hates her creations. Like, she's not trying to destroy them. She's like, screw it. We're all going to die anyway, so if this works, it works. It's this really depressing characterization, and it's something that's written really, really well and performed really, really well. Like she laughs as people are going off to be converted. Like, oh yeah, you'll get your uniforms, all right. Not like in an evil way, in just a almost pity, like this just extreme form of pity. Like, yeah, you're going essentially you're gonna lose your humanity and your death. And it's something like, and when it comes, when the committee on high basically sends the message down, we are eventually gonna convert everyone, she just almost starts laughing, because it's like, yep, I knew this would happen, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Modern science, everybody. It's this layered performance of someone who is just tired and browbeaten and world weary, and it comes across so incredibly well that you have just the real sense of what the character is and where she is going and what she is doing. But you also have her counterpart, Sisterman Constance, who is she's basically every stereotypical nun, like your uptight nun who is basically like in charge of getting people to be converted, and she almost relishes in the idea. And what Platt does with her is he's basically playing around with power dynamics. She is in this position of power, right? And so she's one of the characters who you would, because the Cybermen aren't really evil. They're just trying to survive. They're just overtaken by logic, and that's what makes them so horrifying. They aren't evil. Sisterman Constance is the evil character, or at least, you know, in the moral, in the definite moral wrong here, because she doesn't care about others. She's just trying to hold on to the fact that, you know, she can bully others into becoming Cybermen and pick them out. She has the power and she uses it. And it's a really, really good performance, because that's just who she is. Like, she picks Yvonne Hartley, you know, the innocent girl that Nyssa became friends with, and this episode ends with Yvonne being converted. And it's just it's not necessarily shown until it's done, but like just the implications and what's not shown is almost is more horrifying than if you ever did show it, because that's just something that is really, really dark. Like, you have the stuff, and you have, I mean, like, you have Dodd, the thief played by Darren Nesbitt, who is just trying to make a living and trying to keep himself afloat. Like, well, he's doing basically, you know, harvesting organs off the dead because they don't need them. I need to make a living. Maybe I can try to and sell them to people and keep myself alive. It's very reflective of just the survivalist instinct of the Cybermen through all these characters who aren't bad. but they're just desperate people. Like, the desperation is there, and it's really, really harsh. But I'll say that the Doctor. What's also really important is that Mark Platt plays with the Doctor and Nyssa. He gives them stuff to do. Cybermats have been sold as pets, and Yvonne gave Nyssa as a parting gift her Cybermat. Nyssa not recognizing it. It gets into the TARDIS, and that it wreaks havoc with the console, so they're stuck there for now, which is a great way of keeping the Doctor there, because he just wants to get out. And what it does is it forces the Doctor there, and it forces the Doctor to confront the fact that the Cybermen were responsible for Adric's death. This is the audio that is doing something with Adric's death and giving us that emotional weight. And you get the Doctor, especially the Fifth Doctor, he almost can't deal with it. That's his sort of story arc here, is that he's not only just having trouble dealing with it, he just can't deal with it. The guilt is weighing on him. And of course he's eventually taken to someone in charge. So you have him and Nyssa having this argument. Nyssa demanding that she is going to do everything in her power to stop it from happening and essentially changing history. The Doctor knows it's futile, and he tries to stop her, but instead of explaining to her why it's futile, he just gets angry. And seeing Peter Davison act angry in this episode is great. It's a good catalyst. It makes his Doctor have so much more depth. He has anger that he can't convince that, because obviously he would want to stop them. It's like he says perhaps one of the wrong things is like, well, I don't even know if the history we replace it with would be any better, which is just a harsh thing to say, and it's intentionally harsh. It's something that it grips, and it's something that brings the characters together. It's gripping, and basically the second episode is just gripping drama as the tension is mounting, and the committee is which is as far as the listener knows, just a bunch of already converted Cybermen is calling in reinforcements from the surface to start converting everyone. Like, that's the thing. That's what the story is doing, and where the story is going. That is what's happening. It creates just a great sense of atmosphere and just a great sense of dread overall. So overall, I'm going to give part 2 of Spare Parts another 10 out of 10. All right, it is the 18th of January 2019, and I just finished listening to part 3 of Spare Parts. Now, part 3 of Spare Parts is, it is a great episode. And just playing, it's one of those episodes that I think that moves things along. Like, so everyone remembers the Doctor and Davros's interactions in Genesis of the Daleks, right? So part 3 is kind of where the Doctor and Doctorman Allan, who is, the creator of the Cybermen, kind of interact. They realize the Doctor isn't human and are going to use him to try to make the Cybermen survive. Again, not out of... Remember, this isn't about malice. These are just desperate people. And Mark Platt really knows how to make you feel that, this isn't a people are being malicious. This is a people are in desperate standards, having a very desperate time of things, and just in general trying to have and have one of those things where you where you have a where you have a chance to survive. That's part of just the bleak nature of the stories, that these people haven't had a chance to survive, and they're trying to get that somehow. Like, they desperately want to, they're desperately trying to survive, and using the Doctor potentially as a as a way to do that is is possibly the way. And that's just, it's great, and it's really harrowing. It helps really make the bleak atmosphere even somehow even more bleak, just as the story goes to these dark places and does these genuinely dark things, and it does just these dark things with it, that that you have, the a matter of, these characters trying to live lives like they do, like this. They're not, again, obviously not bad people. That's the important thing, is that none of these people are bad people. They're just stuck in a really bad and hard position, where they really can't do much to save themselves. But what else we have here, is poor Yvonne Hartley converted into a Cyberman, and wandering the streets. Like, it is an absolutely hopeless situation for her, just because she has lost her humanity, but she kind of ever so slightly remembers that she was once this human person, but it's just not really there. And it's such just it's a harrowing sort of, it's this real harrowing sort of, characterization, because, she was, the only one, and the Doctor is paired with Frank, and that's really, really sad. But you also get to see here what the committee is, and the committee as just an idea is just as, just as terrifying, just as creepy, and, just as full of just this sense that, oh, this is, everything here has gone so completely wrong, because the committee itself is, like, it's the brains of, like, the ruling elite, essentially put together into one sort of cyber controller monstrosity that's just sort of like a mix of flesh and cybernetic components trying to be kept alive to decide things. It is a just a terrifying implications are made with what the committee actually is, and what that actually means. Like, it's not like oh, this is fine, everything's great. No, this is just an absolutely horrifying thing. And the sound design here, is just really, really good. Like, for the committee, they use kind of a cyber controller effect from, like, Tomb of the Cybermen, while the rest of the Cybermen have, obviously, a variation on the 10th planet effect, because, this is early on in the Cybermen's development. The idea is that, they are, this is, early Cybermen would be using the 10th planet effect and that sort of thing, while later Cybermen wouldn't. They would be using more of a a different effect, a later effect, which I think is, it's just done really, really well. Like, you get the sense, just all the effects, and you also get the sense that everything is brought in. Like, Sisterman Constant is injured, and she has the tables turned on her in this episode. Like, so they send her off to be converted, which she continually protests, because, it's just a flesh wound, it's just a scratch. It's sort of having the woman who has been sending people off to this process who has essentially been doing it with glee the entire time. Like, that's what really makes her terrifying as a villain, that she's just been so horrible that she's been sending people off to this fate with glee, and not having any real remorse for the fact that people have to become, like, the people are becoming Cybermen. That is just, it's a great sort of thing. And then you have Commander Zhang, who is basically our Cybermen leader, and he's like the first real Cyberman that has, the whole we must survive instinct, and we must do everything, like, that, do everything in our power to survive and to keep ourselves going. It's this the survivalist instinct of and he makes for a great villain. Like he was called for in the second episode. This is the episode where he really gets to shine, because he is, he is there as sort of the big bad, so to speak, of the story. If you haven't listened to Spare Parts yet, you really should, because it's a great example of what Doctor Who can do with, with some really bleak themes and some really bleak stuff. So overall, I'm going to give part 3 of Spare Parts a 10 out of 10. All right, it's the 21st of January 2020, and I just finished listening to part 4 out of of Spare Parts, part 4 of Spare Parts. Now, part 4 of Spare Parts is really interesting. What's really, really interesting is because it's the episode where the Cybermen get defeated. I'm going to start this by talking about the big twist at the end. After the Cybermen are defeated, the Doctor and Nyssa leave. Nyssa giving, giving, giving the characters basically, basically a way to possibly reverse the process. Possibly reverse the process, possibly, save themselves, which I think is just great. Like, having the Doctor there to be like, right, you can still save yourself, I think is just a great way of doing the story itself, and a great way of, bringing all the characters together, and, for a, and bringing everything together for a conclusion. But then, just the final thing is history still finds a way, and it turns out Commander Zhang is still alive. Not only is he still alive, he is there to begin again to make sure the Cybermen push on, which is kind of terrifying, because it basically leaves the listener with this real sense of this real sense of an ending where there's the entire story is one of losing hope. And I think that's something that Mark Platt does an absolutely amazing job at doing. But what else is great is that you genuinely, Mark Platt and Big Finish, they genuinely show the darker nature of this. They show the actual harsh light of day. It's one of those things where the characters aren't there aren't there aren't any big things that end. Like, it's one where you have the story ending with these characters, and you genuinely feel bad for them now that they lost, because there is a lot. There's been there's genuinely a lot of stuff here that the story does a good job of not only exploring, but just plain, doing. This does a a story where you get the you get the ending, you get the characters, you get what the characters are going for. You get the big riots on the streets. You get the day saved with alcohol of all things. Yeah, alcohol, and it's one of those things where you have just such a good solid ending here that you feel bad once it's over. And I will say, Nyssa's final gift is great, and but there is some good coming out of it because the Doctor and Nyssa end up end up they end up fixing everything, thinking they fix everything and overcoming their own sort of trauma with the death of Adric. They deal with that fact that Adric's dead. They're coming to realize that now that he's dead, they've got their only they've gotten over it. Not over it, but enough to doing it. It's one of those things that I think is just great overall. It's one of those things where where you get it. You get just the ending. It's perfectly directed, and sort of perfectly done overall. So you get the ending, and you get the story to come with the ending, and I genuinely think it is excellent. So overall, I have nothing but praise for this story, and I am going to give part 4 of Spare Parts a 10 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give Spare Parts a final score of 10 out of 10, making it the third Fifth Doctor story so far to get that ranking. As always, please leave a like, comment, your opinions down below. Let me know if you agree with me, disagree. Let's get a conversation going, and join me next time when we look at another Nick Briggs script with Creatures of Beauty.